Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Got another interview this week. I'm going to kick it over to you for the introduction, and then we'll get this thing rolling.
Yeah. Tonight we have a coach who's at a new program this year, who the former program he was at, I ran into him on the road last year with my wife, and we had a very, very long conversation about recruiting in baseball. It was awesome. But somebody who we competed against when we were in college, and then I got to coach against when I was at Siena for a little bit. But tonight we are joined by the William & Mary head coach, Rob McCoy. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get going here, if you could just give the listeners a synopsis of your coaching career and how you are ultimately at William & Mary now.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, moving around a lot, but then staying in one place. So I basically started coaching at my alma mater, Dakota Wesleyan University. After I was done playing, I wanted to get my foot in the door there, and then went to grad school and at the University of Virginia and coached. We were just up there watching a football game, but coaching Charlottesville High School JV. Because I didn't want a hole in my resume. We won one game in 2 years, and it was like winning the World Series, man. It was the greatest thing ever. From there, I caught on as the volunteer at JMU, and had a great year with Spanky and up there, and kind of got my feet wet and realized that I needed to, I wasn't going to get hired if I didn't have recruiting experience, and I wasn't going to get recruiting experience if I couldn't get hired. So I had to do something. So I went up to Niagara. I had previously met the head coach there, Chris Chernisky, and doing camps and things. And that's kind of how I got my start. Was I did a bunch of camps on the East Coast after I graduated and met a bunch of people. And so I went up to Niagara. I was going to be up there a year or two, get some experience and leave. Because when I moved to Virginia, I was like, I'm never moving north of the Mason-Dixon line again. And then 18 years later, I was still there, and got some, put down some roots there, and was just trying to do a good job. I got the head job 2 years in. That was interim, and then got the head job, and went through a lot of growing pains. Learned basically everything I know through the School of Hard Knocks, getting my butt kicked, and having to try to be better and find a better way to do things. And, we finally pushed through. We've been building and improving for, I would say, the last 7 or 8 years. And it finally culminated in having the year that we had this year with the MAC championship for the first time and the regional and whatnot. And yeah, I got home from that and had an email from a search firm. And never in my while, one of the first camps that I worked, when I started working camps out on the East Coast, was William & Mary camp. Jim Farr was the head coach, and Ryan Wheeler was here, and just great dudes. And we're at Plumeri Park, and honestly, at the time, I remember thinking it would be a dream come true to be able to coach, be able to coach at that level, that sort of that mid-high major level in a southern area. And here I am. It's actually amazing.
Yeah, Plumeri Park's it's a pretty cool spot. The listeners know, but we have some. Not only did we compete against each other, I played against you while you were coaching Niagara, but they had the 3 years at William & Mary, and I know the squad down there is excited to have you. And while I bleed more Red Fox than I do Tribe, that place will always hold a special place in my heart. And from a baseball perspective, met some awesome people who we were talking about before we got on the podcast, and I'm sure you're going to run into a lot of them. So fired up to see what you're able to do down there, man, and see if we can't get another CAA championship on the outfield wall here soon.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, we've got, we worked hard with our culture, and we worked hard on the mental game, and we worked hard on getting the right people in the room on the team. And I think that, that same thing is going to happen here. And it was nice to, I mean, you guys know, anytime I just told my wife, I'm like, coaching's so hard because at the end of the year, if you don't win it, then did you succeed? And I felt like in the last 3 years or so, we were succeeding at a good level and then finally break through. And there's nothing better than that, because it basically reinforces that what you were doing was right. And there's nothing better as a coach than reinforcing the way that you've basically evolved into coaching and how you treat players and how you run your program and things like that. It's a great feeling. So we're going to do that same thing here.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Speaking of that, finding guys, culture, and you probably can speak to this in a couple different ways because you're just getting in it with William and Mary, but how do you go about identifying guys? Like, what does that look like for you? Maybe overall, things that are important to you, how you identify guys. What does that evaluation and recruitment process look like for you guys?
Yeah, that's, initially we just take in names, right? And then we try to do our research and background on them. I think for me, I'll always believe in the ceiling of a kid, like the floor. I'm not really concerned about the floor as much as I am the ceiling. I've always had a thing for, the gazelles and the long athletic kids, regardless of position. And so we're looking for that. That's what's getting in the door, that type of athlete, taller kids, bigger kids, kids that can float and fly. I mean, obviously that would be ideal if everyone could do that. But once you get past that and you kind of identify some tools that you like, I think it just boils down to what type of kid you want to get. And so we do some initial identification. So one thing that we started at Niagara was we have our core values. Okay. So we have core values at William and Mary now. It's tribe, trust, resilient, integrity, belief, and excellence. And by setting those core values, not only does it help our current team, but it helps us look at our recruits through that lens. Like, does he check these boxes? And when we started doing that at Niagara, it really helped us narrow down the type of kid we were looking for. And so then we would bring those kids on campus, and in the office, I would be like, don't take this the wrong way, but I don't try. I used to try to talk kids into coming here, and now I try to talk them out of it. Because if I can tell you everything we do and how hard this is going to be and how challenging that I make it for the players here, and you don't want that, then I succeeded in making sure that the guy that does want that is gonna be the guy that I want on this team, and he wants that challenge. And the guys that I couldn't scare away were dudes. They were dudes. So when they got to Niagara, and the same thing's going to happen here, when they get to you and they play, and then you see what type of person they are, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And so all the kids are like that then, right? So I'm not sugarcoating things. I'm not telling them what they want to hear. If they don't like it hard, and they don't like it challenging, and they don't like the mental game, and they don't like to live by core values, then they're not going to fit. So they'll say no, and that's perfectly fine with me. I don't get offended by that anymore like I used to.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist on it, because I think that if you were to ask a lot of coaches that question and give them the framework that you just came with, I think a lot of guys would say, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, and we talk about this frequently on the podcast, like, college baseball is not for the faint of heart. Like, you need to be good enough. Like, you need to check the boxes from a tools perspective, just like you talked about. You need to be able to run certain times. You need to look a certain way. You need to be able to throw a certain velocity. But there's a lot of guys that you're going to cross paths with that check those boxes. Mm-hmm. The hardest thing is getting that culture fit and getting the kid who's going to come in and is going to thrive because he's in an environment that challenges him. And a lot of kids aspire to play college baseball without really understanding the time and effort and the commitment that goes into it once you get there. A lot of kids think they work hard because they're in the gym 3 or 4 days a week and they get their swings in with their hitting coach, not realizing that that's the absolute bare minimum when you get to college and you go into an environment where it's bigger than you. It's bigger than that one individual. And I think that's a really cool way to view it. And I'm sure that's really helped you whittle it down. And you probably end up with kids that mirror the qualities that you want and are going to fit into your culture, but not just fit in, but elevate it. And
yeah, it has really made a difference. It really has. Cause I get told no by some really good players. And, sometimes you're like, oh man, like I really like that, that would have been nice. Nice piece. But the way we do it now is that I can sleep at night knowing that that the guys that we do get are going to be cut from the same cloth. And so challenging them is not going to be a problem. And, the funny part about when I say it's challenging or it's the toughest thing we do or whatever, I'm the nicest guy in the world. Like I'm not yelling and screaming and whatnot. It's the part that you said about the stuff that they're doing, that we're doing is the minimum, and they have to be self-starters and they have to be dogs and they have to drive themselves. And the difference between, I say this all the time. And one of the things that clicked with the team last year at Niagara was, we started the year and I said, look, what do we want to do as a team? Like, we want to win the conference. I said, yes, so does everybody else. So what are we going to do different? Everybody's got the same goal. I'm tired of talking about this. We've worked for 7 years to go from 11-13 to 13-11. That's a 2-game swing. And what's the difference? The difference is, what are you guys willing to sacrifice so that we can cross that line, that we can, that we can go toe to toe with anybody we play. And that really resonated with that group last year because I had a whole team full of guys that could be challenged like that. And, they would, we're out, guys are getting early works 2 hours before practice and on their own. And pitchers are hitting fungos to guys, offering to hit fungos because they're like, I want this guy to make plays behind me. And, the whole thing just kind of clicked with them. And so that's the key, is that you've got to get those guys that, that's the secret, that can push themselves. Because if the coaches are pushing players at college level, you're not going to win a lot of games. But if the players, we talk about that. We're a player-led team and not a coach-fed team. If the players are leading the players, you're going to be really good.
The margins are so thin. And I think that's a hard thing for people to wrap their head around. But like, you're in the CAA now with Northwestern or Northeastern and Wilmington and Charleston, and there's a lot more parity talent-wise in that conference. So those weekends can come down to a play or two. And that's the difference between winning a series and not winning a series. And that culture point that you're talking about, the guys who are resilient, who can come back from a bad Friday night loss and play well on Saturday and Sunday. But that's how you stack those weekends together. And I mean, you asked me before we got on here, I was lucky enough to be there and we had a pretty good stretch. Like, what do you think was good? And it was the kids, the culture. Like, we had guys who held the line just like your guys at Niagara. There was a standard of, this is how you show up every day. And it was a player-led team. Mm-hmm. And I'd never been a part of that anywhere else. Maybe a little bit in college, like we had that 05 team was pretty self-sufficient. It had a bunch of really tough kids, but just watching some of these older guys go about it was a cool thing to experience and watch a bunch of mature guys bring each other along. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're looking for your guys. You need guys who are willing to bring people along with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to have that. And this whole idea, and the thing too is it's getting more difficult to find because it's not as it's not as commonplace for the confrontations amongst teammates. Everyone's waiting for the adult to do it. But when you do find it, it's very clear, like, and you just got to make sure that you've got like the right kid, because you're going to have your leaders are your leaders one way or the other. Either going to lead in the right direction or lead in the wrong direction. So you got to make sure that you got the right leaders. But you see those alphas, and the alpha is your best player, and the alpha is your hardest worker, and your alpha is like, we're like, you're doing this. Come on, let's go do it. And so that is a rare trait. But when you find it, it's very valuable especially on a team aspect of things.
When you're going through that evaluation to identify those guys, like you talked about how you speak to them in the office, what kind of homework are you doing ahead of time? And then the follow on with that would be, do you find any common threads between the guys that kind of check that box for you? Like, are you talking like multi-sport athletes? Are you talking like a certain kind of background? Anything that you've uncovered with your 20 plus years of being in the game that kind of signals to you, all right, this kid's got a chance to be a fit?
Yeah, I love hockey players, man. Not really. I think, I mean, the way they play, like there's no substitute for the way. I know it sounds cliche, but like, guy hits a ground ball. It's high motor play. Guy hits a ball to the outfield, and he's thinking second base. Like he's not shutting it down halfway down the line. Like he's satisfied with what he just got. I mean, I know that, hey, Twitter's abound with people like trashing coaches for having those kind of expectations for players. But at the end of the day, like if you hit a ground ball at second base and the only thought you have is like, this might be the one time I beat this out, so I'm going to try. I mean, that's the only answer you need right there. That's the dog that you need. So it's pretty much that, you see how a guy plays. It's not rocket science. Like obviously you need the talent, you need the 88 plus arm. But if the guy doesn't get rattled, he gives up a hit, and then he gets better. Like you see him kind of flip the switch, even though I don't really believe that that's the case. But you know what I mean? Like he bears down and he understands that he lost focus, and just those kind of things, going the extra mile. So I think, being coachable, that's why I like our kids to come to our camps, because I like to talk to them and I like to see if they'll take instruction. That's not always possible, but then you ask their coaches, hey, there's ways to ask those questions where you kind of get at it. Cause if you say, well, does he compete? The answer is always going to be yes. Cause they're, unless it's a huge problem. So you're just kind of digging around that and asking those questions. And then I'll tell you right now, like people also say that they've recruited for years and never asked for stats. I don't believe that. Like you can't, you have to know that a kid has dominated his level. Like, so we're looking for strikeouts to walk ratios on both the pitchers and the hitters. Cause if you strike out too much in high school, it's not going to get better in college. So this idea that we don't want to look at stats is completely false, because I want to look at that stat and I want to see if a kid's hitting, 280 in high school. I mean, unless he's running a 6.4 and he's left-handed and he can bunt, like that's not going to do much. So, that's kind of what, those are kind of the check marks, the boxes that we're trying to check, I guess.
There's a lot of truth in it, because it's something that I used to always say to my guys, because they would complain sometimes about, like, I would jack the machine up and just, here we go. Like, here's 92 on the front plate, and we got to figure out how to hit it because we're going to see it. And it was always with the younger guys when they got to college, because like they don't see this all the time and they struggle a little bit. And you'd always have that, like, the conversation would always ultimately end with like, when you level up from high school to college, doesn't matter what division you're going to, the players are better. Like there's a reason that there's only been 25,000 big leaguers in the history of the game. Like, this is a hard game to play. It doesn't get easier the more you go up. And I think you're right. Like, I've heard people be like, yeah, it doesn't really matter to me. I go like, yeah, but if they're not hitting or they're not getting outs, and they're like, if their ERA is a 7, like, that's amazing that he throws 95, but he's pitching at a 7 clip. He's not facing easier hitters when he gets to college. He's in fact facing better hitters. And, you can't, like, those, we've all seen it. The freshmen get on the bump in the fall, and like, inevitably, and outing 1 or 2, they get lashed. And it's like, welcome to college baseball, bub. Like, you're 82, you're 88, that's straight with no movement and that little wrinkle in your slider. Like, it ain't getting a lot of guys out. Like, we're going to have to figure, like, you can't edge the plate because the strike zone now in college is tighter and the hitters are better and they understand the strike zone more. And, I think it is, like Andy said earlier, it's not for the faint of heart. And you need those, like, the reason that, what I'm driving at, the reason that, and you're not the first person to talk about resiliency and being able to be tough. Like, we all recruited it. We all talked about it. Like, every guy who comes on here and says it, like, we touch on it. And I don't necessarily know that we've dove this deep into it, but like, there's a reason for it, because this is hard and it's not going to get any easier. So you need those guys to be able to get out on the field 2 hours before and start working on the things it is that they're not good at, so that you can continue to be good. And I think sometimes people just kind of think like, hey, I'm really good in Western New York. Like, awesome, man. Like, that doesn't really mean much. Like, you're just a run-of-the-mill guy. And that's awesome. You can go play college baseball, but you have to understand, like, you're going up against 10% of other high school baseball players that are going to play college baseball somewhere. So you got to get better. And that's where I think, like, that character piece comes in and everything else. But, like, the stat line is absurd. I've heard that before too. You're the first person to bring it up on here, and I've always thought, like, I don't believe you. I would say, like, there's context behind it. Like, you could also hit 590 and be a guy who's playing like Class D baseball. Like, okay, like, I don't know what that means, but I can tell you if you're hitting 280 in Class D baseball, like, you're likely not going to get recruited. Like, that's just kind of the way of the world.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Like, obviously, we're paying attention to the level the kid is playing in high school and what he's doing those stats against. But if you've done this long enough, you should have the experience to know who he's playing against, or at least have a pretty good idea.
Yeah. But I also think, to your point, like, people want to say that they don't look at stats because, like, this has become a metric driven process. Like, you go on Perfect Game, or you go on PBR, or name whatever showcase that is out there, right? Like, we pull up. I still do it to this day. Like, I'll pull up kids, Keith Glasser, baseball, and I'll pull it up. I see all the metrics, but, like, you're not actually we need to see you actually play the game of baseball. Like, this isn't a metric sport where you just get to be the best because you throw the ball the hardest. Like, you still have to get outs. You still have to prevent runs. You still have to score runs. Like, you have to play. There's a lot more that goes into it. And, like, we talk about it all the time. Billy Saleno was on here, and he's like, and I think Billy's one of the best hitting coaches in the country, anywhere. And he's like, yeah, exit velo, cool, but, like, we don't play in a carnival. Like, I don't know what that means, hitting a ball off a tee. I need to know if you can hit a ball that is 92 miles an hour and sinking, or bearing in on your hands, or a slider that's moving away. Like, yeah, anybody can hit that off of a tee. And same thing with the feet. Like, you see it all over Twitter, right? Like, or Instagram now, like, kids that are touching, bumping 95, 96, and it's like off the backstop. Like, awesome, man. You got some serious arm strength, but, like, you need to actually get guys out with that. Like, yeah, you can throw it hard, but if you can't prevent guys from getting on base and then not prevent them from scoring, you're not going to be on the mound a whole hell of a lot. And, those are things that I think a lot of people get caught up in the recruiting process, thinking, like, well, if I get to this velo, or if I get to this exit velo, or if I can throw it this hard across the diamond, like, I've noticed an increase in, like, how hard we throw it across the diamond. Like, awesome. If you can't field it first, I don't care how hard you throw it across the diamond. It's irrelevant how hard you do. If you can field it and go, awesome. But you can be 90 across the diamond all day, but if you can't actually field the ball, or you can't go backhand, or you can't go slow roller, like if you can't do the things that you need to do to actually play the game, you're not going to find yourself on the field. And I think that like it's hard for people to kind of wrap their mind around, like you have to actually be able to play this game at a high level to go play at to play in college. And ultimately, if you want to move on, but like you can't just rely on what your metrics are. You can't just rely on your 60 time or your exit velo or your like you have to do something more. And I think it's quantifiable too with pitchers. Like we talk about it. Every pitching guy we've had on, so like. It's so much more in the college game than it is in high school. Like you have to be able to control the running game. You can't be a 1-8 to the plate and pitch in college. Like it's just not going to happen unless you're going to be like 99 and not let anyone on base. But if you're going to be 91 with a slider and you're 1-8 to the plate, like we might as well just start the guy on third when he gets to first. Like, hey man, time, just go ahead and go over there. Because no one, like, you have to field your position. If you're going to pitch in the back half of games, you got to field your position. Because they're, like it or not, what Twitter says, people still bunt in this game. So you have to field your position. Like, there's a reason that they do. If you can't field your position, like, yeah, I'm just going to keep bunting and let you throw it down the line until they get you out of the game. We'll make it this a track meet. And I think like people lose sight of all that stuff in the recruiting process, I think. And I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm sorry I'm on my soapbox. But I think that people lose sight of the fact that like you still have to play this game. And that's ultimately where the decision gets made based off of whether or not you are going to be recruitable. Like your metrics can be great, but if you can't actually play when the lights are on, it's going to be tough sledding. Like you might find a place, but it's going to be hard. Like you're going to have to increase your baseball IQ and your skill set in game in order to find yourself in the lineup at a frequent clip. And it might happen. It might never happen. It might not happen until you're a senior, but it's going to be an uphill climb.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the thing that I would say about that is, all what you just said is perfectly accurate. The tools, like, here's the fine line, is that the tools can get you in the door. Your ability to be coached can keep you there, and your ability to perform will get you basically everything that you want to get out of the game. So like if you don't have the tools, it doesn't matter how skilled you are. If you don't have requisite tools, like that's the other part of it. You could be the best, the best skilled baseball player, but if you can't run, throw, or hit, you're not going to play at a certain level. You can play at some level, but not a certain level. And then once you get to the level, if you can't be coached and can't develop and can't get better at some of those things, then you're not going to advance. And then, so I see those guys, and then I see the guys that can't perform because they're competing for a spot that they've never had to compete for, or they're, or things like that. The pressure of having to actually go out there and perform at this game are not there. So the best competitors I've seen, the best of those guys are toolsy guys that are coachable, that love the game so much that the discomfort that comes with the game, whether it be pressure to get cut or pressure to perform or pressure to win a job, they enjoy it. They know that that's part of it, and they don't just deal with it. We talk about this all the time. You don't deal with adversity. You can deal with adversity, but if you've got to have like that Jocko mentality of good. Like you have to want the adversity, because if you want it, there's no way that you can want that adversity. Like you want it to be as cold as possible during the game, because if you're dealing with adversity, it's like, all right, I'm gonna put my jacket on and I'm just going to suffer through this. If you're not dealing with it, you just turn around and go home. Anyone can stand there with a jacket on and be miserable and deal with it. Or you could be excited about it, right? And so those are the kind of competitors that we're looking for. The guys that are getting excited. I want to compete. Like, coach, go recruit somebody that's going to push me because I want that guy. I want it because I'm going to show him and I'm going to show you that I'm better than whoever you can bring in here. Like, those are the guys that are dogs.
Those are the best ones to be around. I had a poster in my office. It's downstairs in my basement, but it says "good," and it has his whole speech is like written into it. God, it was electric.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find that and hang it up. My wife's gonna kill me, but
just put it in the living room. Yeah.
But there's so much I think that goes into it, like all of that, plus the, as you were talking, I was thinking, like, how many guys have you seen at a showcase that are like super toolsy in the showcase portion, and then you go watch them play and it doesn't translate. Mm-hmm. Or there's guys that you watch a guy who runs a 7-0, looks okay, and then goes and plays short and plays up, and you're like, damn, that first step, and he gets off the ball. Mm-hmm. Like and like, that's where I think, like, with Andy and I sometimes, like, in explaining to some people, like, like, they look at it and it's like, well, his numbers are mine, his numbers are better than that kid's, and he's going to William and Mary. It's like, yeah, but if you watch that kid play, like, he gets off the ball. He can go back in the hole and throw a guy out. He can do all of these different things, and it makes it a little bit more dynamic. And I think sometimes, like, the compete factor is such a huge piece, and channeled correctly. Like, bring a dude in here and I'm going to show you that I'm better than him. And it's going to push me to be better. And it ultimately elevates your program. Like, I had a handful of those guys when I was at RPI and they fired me up. But like, there's like, you can tell me you want to compete, but like, it's not something you can fake, I think, is what I'm driving at. Like, there's certain aspects of competing that, like, you can't fake that you're a competitor. And, like, I used to like, if I'm playing Scrabble against my grandma, like, I'm out for blood, man. Like, this is like, I don't care who I'm playing against. Like, I want to win. And that was just me. And I despised losing, and we were going to do everything we could to put ourselves in that position. And I think sometimes, like, if you're younger, like, it's finding something to drive that competitive factor for you, which is why, I'm a proponent of multiple sport athletes, because I think that you can find, if you can compete in multiple things, like, this is a hard game to just try to compete in. Like, we can't really, outside of just straight up playing games, like, it's hard to find, like, I'm saying hard in the context, it's hard to find things to compete against. Like, certainly you can make things up and do it, but like, you can go play hoops and you can play and compete and do those things. You can wrestle, you can play soccer, like, you can go do other things and find that compete factor and just just translate it into whatever it is you're doing. And I think that those are things sometimes that some guys are missing, but like, when you find it, whoo, baby, is it fun to coach? Like,
yeah. I mean, and there's so many nuances to that too, right? Like, when you the whole arm strength thing you mentioned earlier about the infielders. Well, I've had infielders that could throw 90 across the diamond, but it took a crow hop to do it. Like, to be able to throw the ball quick with a quick release with carry across the diamond with a clock that with an accurate clock in your head about how fast the runner is, how long you need. I mean, it's unbelievable to watch a good infielder do that. And it's so hard to explain. Like, there's no way you could sit down and explain to a group of, prospective student athletes and have that really make sense without just showing them. And it's so hard because, to your point about the geographical kids, and, when we were in Western New York, there were a lot of kids that their dream was to, play Coastal Carolina or play somewhere. And that's perfectly okay. But the problem with that is that there was no comparison there. There was no, you're the best kid here, but man, there's a lot of really good kids out there, and they play all year round and they do things like way easier than you do things. And so, I think just not having that's why, having guys like you guys to give some, give some insight into what's out there and what this all looks like. It's I'm always amazed at how good the players are now. And this started with COVID, and there's dudes in college baseball that would have gotten drafted 4 years ago in a 40-round draft. And it's pushing everybody. Everybody was losing their minds over how good, gosh, who are those guys, man? My memory, like, a couple of years ago, they were like, this College World Series was the best, World Series that we've had. Yeah, no kidding. Cause that was the draft class that was 5 rounds, and every one of those kids would have been in professional baseball. And so then it went to 20, and it's at 20. And then you have the transfer portal that's literally like the cream of the crop is rising. And I just can't believe how good our game has gotten and how talented the players are. And it stinks for me. Like, I don't know if I would have ever played in this current situation, because it's all getting, it's all running downhill, and there's talent everywhere. And so, it's tough. It's tough sledding out there, man. It really is, but it's exciting for the game.
Oh, it's great for the game. I'm not anti-transfer portal. I don't think Andy is either, but I think the thing that is shocking to people when it comes to the portal, and we don't have to go into this because we've talked about this 1,000 times though, is that the amount of dudes that are transferring up and playing right away. People have always transferred.
Yeah.
College baseball. It's been going on forever.
Yeah.
But the amount of guys that are leaving mid-major Division 1s or Division 2s and 3s and then transferring up into mid-major / top end Power 5 baseball and succeeding, I don't think it's not a shock to us, right? If you've been around this game long enough, that there's dudes at all levels that, yeah, man, by the time that kid's a junior, yeah, dude, he's an All-American. He could go play at Wake, but it didn't happen. Now it is, and it's whew, okay. But I think it is making the floor of college baseball has risen because of it, because the barrier to entry is a lot higher than it ever has been. But it's, I think the initial shock of oh my God, there's 3,000 people in the transfer portal. Yeah, it's high. There's COVID and a bunch of other stuff, but people have always transferred. I personally think it's better than making a kid's life miserable for a year to get them to leave school so you get your money back. You can just have a conversation of hey man, not going to work out here. You're not going to play. I'm happy to help you when you get in the portal, go play somewhere else where you can have success and have a decent enough career. But just making people, an 18-year-old's life miserable because you missed on the recruiting process. I've said this a billion times. Newsflash, they don't hit it 1,000%. We miss. It happens. But I think
the big leagues team, the big league teams miss.
it at least gives kids an opportunity to all right, man, have you jump in the portal. I'm going to help you. You're a good, now, if you're not a good kid and you don't do anything, that's a different argument. But, hey, you're a really good kid. It's just not going to work out here. I think you should jump in the portal and, I'll help you and I'll make some phone calls for you if, with whoever it is you want to go to. But you're right.
I've said this, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I like the portal for what number one, for what you just said. But number two, it forces us as coaches to be better. I still think that it is a major problem in our profession of how we treat players. I'm probably going to get smoked for saying that, but you can have a disciplined approach and you can hold your players accountable without being a jerk. And there is no amount of yelling at these current players that's going to matter in the long run. So if a player, chooses a school because a guy is a phenomenal recruiting guy and he puts on a great face, and then they go somewhere and the player gets sold a bill of goods on how they're going to be treated, that's fine with me, man, because I'm going to treat my kids right. And, they're going to have a fulfilling experience for me, and I'm not going to dog them. I'm not going to cuss them. I'm not going to disrespect them. I'm going to just have man-to-man conversations with them. We say we want men, treat them like men, sit them down in the office, understand that there's empathy involved in all this. And at the end of the day, let's see where the dust settles. Cause I mean, that's one of the reasons why things clicked for us. And I'm saying, like, I haven't always been that way. I learned to be that way. And now I'm very comfortable with it because that's how I really want to coach. And, in the last 2-3 years when teams were leaving, for whatever reason, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but teams are leaving other schools in the MAC because they're not happy. The guys in Niagara were fulfilled and they were satisfied and they loved what we were doing. And it was all because of what we created there that any coach can create, with the right information.
No, you're right. I think because we do have a lot of coaches listening to this too, but I think it's interesting when you start coaching in this game. We're of the generation where when we played, we just got screamed and yelled at the entire time that you were in college.
Yeah.
Whereas now, not to say I mellowed out a lot as I got older, but also you have life events that change you and you have kids and things start to change. It gets to the point where if you just yell all the time, it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you do have to raise your voice for some reason, no one's really going to listen. But if you do raise your voice, all of a sudden it's whoa, we got to lock in here. We've let this one go a little bit too far. But you're 100% right. The amount of empathy that I think lacks sometimes is astounding. At the end of the day, we're coaching 18 to 22-year-old kids now, 27, but that'll revert back to 18 to 22 here shortly.
Yeah.
But you can't sit in the recruiting process and say hey, I want your son to come here and we're going to make him a better human being and a better man by the time he graduates, and then not really help that along the way. And I think that, Joe Reyna was on our podcast, and I love Joe. Joe's one of my, he was one of my mentors when I got into this game, especially when I got to, RPI. He was on one of our earlier podcasts, and he was just what I say and what you ultimately have when you come here better match up. If I tell you this in the recruiting process, and then you go and, we're on an official and you're asking the team and you're talking to guys, what I'm telling you better be exactly what it is that they're telling you. And when you get here, it better be what I told you. And I think that there's so much truth in that you want to make sure that is what is matching up during your recruiting process of this is what they're telling me. Ask those tough questions when you're with the kids to see hey, coach says he doesn't really yell all that much and he says he's the player's coach. Is that does he get into you guys a lot? Nah, man, if we need it, yeah. But he's not out there screaming and yelling and dog cussing us left and right. Okay, cool. That might, or yeah, no, man, we get screamed at every single day. That right there should be a red flag. Yeah, okay, he told me that doesn't happen. And look, at the end of the day, right? You're likely going to get your voice raised at you at some point in time during your career. But it's never, if it's done correctly, it's at a way where it's it's not because they're mad at you. It's more be we've had this conversation 27 times and you're continually doing the same thing wrong. Maybe me yelling at you in that moment might get you to snap out of it. I don't know, but I think sometimes but I think gone are the days of being able to just scream and yell and do those types of things. Cause I don't think kids respond to it. I think kids are way more that, everyone, when I was leaving coaching, it was why. And you can use that as this is driving me nuts, or they actually are inquisitive and want to know why. How is this going to help me? Or why am I doing this? If you can answer those questions, it becomes a lot more of an actual coaching relationship of being able to be hey, I used to yell at my guys, don't yes me. I want you to ask questions. If it doesn't make sense, please be yo, Glass, why am I doing this? Instead of just being a yes man and just doing it because I said so. I want you to think along with me in your development process instead of me just like, don't regurgitate everything it is that I say either. Like, hey, what happened there? I pull spun off that ball. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, you don't know. Like, I need you to ask. So I think, like, they want to know that you're an actual human being, right? Like, when I played, like, I didn't know anything about our head coaches. By the time I left, like, everyone knew my wife and my son and our dog. Like, they want to know that you're not just a robot who just shows up and coaches and screams and yells.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And I think about, listen, yeah, I've got a decade worth of players at Niagara that would be like, whatever that dude's saying is not like a fact. But I evolved, and part of it is just the world we live in, and I enjoy it. And one of the best things that I think I can give my players is how to maturely handle a conflict. And it's the easiest thing in the world as a coach to yell and scream and assert your authority. And it's like, but at the end of the day, man, it doesn't get any more results, because really what it boils down to is you're either not on the same page with the guy, or you got the wrong guy. And so, one of them's your fault. Well, they're both your fault, but one of them is a little bit more drastic than the other. But you should be able to sit a guy down in the office and say, look, I've had this conversation several times. What good organization do you know that has employees that are repeatedly asked to do a certain thing and they don't do it, and either A, they're successful, or B, they let the employee continue doing what he's doing? And when you talk to them like that and you get that out in the air, they're more likely to say, oh yeah, I see where this guy's coming from. And if they don't, then you have a conversation with them again. And if you don't, unfortunately, they're disqualifying themselves from your team. And I think, as cutthroat as that part sounds, once I started treating, like, putting the ball in their court to make things better, like, it's your responsibility to improve X, Y, or Z. And I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And if they can't do that, then you do need a roster change. And eventually what will happen is you will get a whole team full of guys that when you speak to them like men, they respond. And oftentimes you'll catch that kid that's like, yeah, man, I've been goofing off. Like, I need to lock in and all that kind of stuff. And I could go on for days, but the biggest thing I do, like now, what I do is we have a growth plan. And in that growth plan is personal goals, team goals, breathing routines, and a eulogy. How do you want to be remembered here? And it starts with start, stop, continue. What are you going to start doing, stop doing, continue doing to take you from where you are right now to where you want to be? And then they write that down and they put it in a shared folder. And I look at it from time to time, and I'll take a screenshot and say, are you doing this? Are you holding yourself to this? Right. And so they really can't back out of that, man. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, I just told my coach what I want to do, and he's holding me accountable to that. So those are all the ways that I think you can, mentor. It's more of a mentoring thing. Like, where in that do I need to yell and scream at you? Like, and if I'm going to get that mad during the game, I found, God's honest truth, Keith, I found that I was getting that mad because I wasn't teaching them that stuff in practice. And so I was embarrassed that they weren't able to make this routine play or do that thing, or they got exposed on that defense. And I was like, well, we didn't go over it. So that's on me, man. So at the end of the day, this is all personally me. And I'm not suggesting anybody coach the way I coach. This is the way I've evolved. This is what I'm comfortable with. I'm more comfortable in my own skin now than I've ever been. And it seemed to be working really well, because the guys, like, we had to make some roster moves here a week ago or so. And one of the best compliments I got was after those were made, I went to the team and I said, look, these are excellent dudes. Like there's nothing wrong with them. It just didn't fit here. So take care of them. Make sure you're looking out for them. We'll try to find them, a good place to land. And like 5 dudes came to me and were so thankful that we just had empathy for what just happened instead of being like, well, yep, just another day. Don't care about those guys. We're moving on. We're plowing forward. Like this game, like what we do, why do we do it if it's not to like teach these dudes how to, mature and have like face-to-face, man-to-man conversations and lower the temperature in the room and all the kind of stuff that you need moving forward, instead of just screaming at everybody and and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a learning process for me. And like I said, you'll find a decade worth of guys that don't even know who the hell they're listening to right now. But and to them, I am it's bittersweet because I wish they could have played for me now. And but they're, my experience with them was one step closer to how I am now. So it's unfortunate that, some of them had to live through some of my stuff that way. But if I had any advice to any of the coaches listening to kind of rethink how you treat guys would be a good one.
Really easy to forget. And I think that I think that a lot of times this falls on deaf ears when you're talking about kids going through the recruiting process. 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, like they're still trying to figure out how to get through the world.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, that mentorship piece, like the X's and the O's from a baseball perspective, for the vast majority of guys, that's the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's pretty much all the same.
Yeah, it's not
baseball, man.
It's not terribly different. I'm sure everybody's got a little gadget or some verbiage that they use, but I think it's the connection you make with the player, to your point. And that connection's made easier if you do your homework up front.
Mm-hmm.
You get the right type of kid that you're going to click with. But they're kids and like they're under a lot of stress. At a school like William and Mary, you're not just expected to be good at Plumeri Park. You don't go to William and Mary to get a 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
These kids need to excel in all phases, and
be good at everything.
I think it's easy to forget sometimes that they are kids and they are learning just as much as we do on a day-to-day basis. And if you can establish that level of trust, and you can set a standard that they understand that this is the standard that I have to meet, and that's not always changing. I think that's a really important thing, because then you can have that conversation with a kid because it's clear as day. Like if you have to have that tough conversation, we've talked about this, our standard, this is what you told me you were going to do. And you're not up to that. You're not meeting that standard now. Now it's an easy conversation that you can talk through.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't turn into this disciplinary confrontation. And to your point, I agree with you 100%. I think we grew up playing in a different era. It wasn't a worse era. You see these guys on Twitter talking about how baseball's changed and everybody's soft. Now, kids aren't soft.
No, they're
not soft. They're just you need to be able to treat them with respect, and you can get the most out of them. Kids still play hard. Kids still really want to win. That hasn't changed, but I think that you can go about it from a different angle. You can elevate a kid without having to break him down first. And I think it's a really important message that you're bringing here. And it's something that if you're a kid listening to this and you're going through the recruiting process, are you going to play for somebody that you're going to enjoy doing it with? It's that simple. Those 4 years you're going to spend on a college campus, guys like yourself, whoever the head coach is, whoever the assistant coaches are, they will have a bigger impact on you from 18 to 22 than any other people in your life. You'll learn more on that baseball field. You'll learn more through those tough conversations. You'll learn more on the bus, more in the locker room. Those are like your formative years in a lot of ways. And if you're going through this process, you got to figure out, am I playing for the right kind of guy?
Mm-hmm.
And, if your style isn't for a kid, great, go find a place that's a little bit of a different style. But you have to understand that those people make such a big impact on you, and you want to make sure that worst case scenario, you're coming out the back end of that program and you're going to have become a better person. And I think the way you go about it lends itself to that, because the kids they're going to be held to a high standard, but they're not going to be put in a situation where they're getting shit on all the time. Some kids can handle that and it doesn't matter, and it can wash off their back and they show up the next day like nothing mattered. But that kid is few and far between. And I don't think it was any different back when we played. I think we just dealt with it. I think some kids you dealt with it because you had to deal with it. I don't think it was easier. I don't think kids were tougher back then. So no, I think it's really cool to hear.
I think we were
walk through your philosophy there.
Not that we were immune to it, but I think that like we grew up with everyone doing it, and it was just normal. Whereas, I don't necessarily know if it is, but I think I think the interesting thing, and it's not like, it's worth asking the question during your recruiting process. Like, you go on visits, like, it's worth asking the question. And people have asked me this, so I know that it's out there, but like, how have you evolved as a coach? And when you kept saying it, Rob, like I kept thinking about it. Like, I've had people ask me that question, but I think it's a fair question, because if you're, Heels said this to me when I got into coaching, and it struck me, it stuck with me, obviously, because I'm talking about it 20 years later. But he's like, if I'm going to ask my players to get better every year, like I as a coach have to do things in order to better myself every year. I just can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that stuck with me because it was like, wow, okay, like, huh. And at the time, like, I just started coaching, like I thought I knew everything there was to know about baseball. And I was quickly humbled in realizing that I knew nothing about actual baseball and coaching. But I think it's a fair question, because like as a coach, and I would always tell my guys this, like I'm continually trying to better myself as a coach. If I'm going to ask you to get better at whatever it is I'm asking you to get better at, like I'm going to do my best to better myself too, because I can't just be the same coach I was 5 years ago. It's not going to work. And I think that those are things that it's worth thinking about and worth asking in the recruiting process. Like, hey, like, how have you evolved as a head coach or what? And like, you're going to get some pretty good answers. Like, yeah, no, I used to scream and yell. And then, I realized that that's not the best route. And, I got married and I have kids now. And I realized, like, I'm not frustrated at the kid. I'm frustrated because they're screaming, crying with a 10-week-old at home. But, it can be maddening. But I think that those are fair questions to ask in the recruiting process, because it sheds light on how that program's run, how you're going to be coached. Like, you can discern a lot of information asking questions like that. And the other side of that is, in the recruiting process, like if a kid asks me that question, it instantly tells me like, like this kid is really looking for something, like he knows what he's looking for in this process. And he's trying to discern that information. Like, it's telling me that you've legitimately thought about this. It's not like hey, do you guys, do you go south at the start of the year for this? Like, yeah, man, I was at Niagara for 20 years. Like, we can't play baseball in February up here. Like, yeah, we go south. Like, go look at the internet. And you make light of it, but it happens all the time. And it's like, you can kind of come away from that as a coach. Cause like, if all things are equal and I got a kid who like seemingly didn't do a lot of research or doesn't really care, and a kid who legitimately is asking serious questions, like trying to find the right fit, like I'm going to want the kid that is super squared away in the recruiting process. Like, that kid, that's telling me when you get here, you're going to do more to get us to where it is that we want to be as a team, versus like, do you go to Florida in the fall or in the summer, like, or spring? Like, yeah, we go to Florida. Like, we're in Troy, New York. We can't play baseball here. So we're going. But I think that like, and it's not just a question like that, right? It's other questions that can drive at what it is that you're ultimately looking for out of a program for you. Because on the other side, and this is where, Andy and I have this conversation all the time, like the coaches are recruiting you. Like, you need to be recruiting the coaches too, because you are going to spend an inordinate amount of time with them. Like Andy just said it, like it is a formative point in your life where you're going to spend, At the Division I level, you're playing 56 games. There's travel. There's like the amount of time you're going to spend with these people is more than you've ever experienced in your life. And you want to make sure that you're spending it with people who genuinely care about you and want you to actually get better at the game of baseball and become a really good human being. And I think that like that does get lost sometimes. But I think if you can identify that in the recruiting process during your process, you're going to ultimately land at a spot that you are going to thrive, no matter where it is. The 1, 2, 3, Power 5 to low mid major, doesn't matter. You're going to find a spot where you feel comfortable that you are going to really thrive as a person and a student athlete for 4, 5, 15 years if we have another pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a tough process. And, I always joke that recruiting is like dating, right? Like you have to be completely honest on both sides or the relationship's not going to work. But oftentimes, a school will look really good and you'll kind of, ignore some of the, the things that don't fit you that aren't going to fit you that well. Right. And so it's tough because I wish that kids would dive deeper into how they're going to be treated. I think, like we talked about earlier, I think it's pretty for a high level baseball player. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's not going to matter to me. Like I'm used to being coached hard, or I'm used to this, used to that, but it's not the same. You're not living with your travel ball coach in a hotel for 8 weeks. Right. And your travel ball coach isn't the one that's going to decide that your career is over someday if it doesn't work out. And so, yeah, it's not just for me, it's for all levels. Like I played NAIA baseball. We had a really good team. Back then, NAIA could be like the lowest level in the world, or you could compete with D1s. And I've seen a bunch of different levels. I've got tons of friends at all levels of college baseball. And really the only difference is depth. There's good players everywhere and there's great coaches everywhere. And so players really just need to like do more of the background behind the scenes stuff. Like you really shouldn't decide to go to a school based on if you get batting gloves or not, or if you're Easton and not Rawlings, like that stuff's not going to keep you warm at night. It's not going to matter 40 years from now, but it is going to matter who you played for 40 years from now. And it's going to matter the type of experience that you had. And so, yeah, I mean, a litmus test, a couple of my litmus tests are, is the guy hiding you from his players? The first thing I want you to do is ask my players anything. Ask them anything. There's not a single thing to hide. Do you want to play for a guy? One of my goals is to get a genuine hug from your mom on senior day. Do you want to play for a guy that cares about that's going to treat you in a way that he's not going to have to hide from your mom on senior day or give an awkward hug? Because I've been that guy before, and not only do I not want to be that guy anymore, but you don't want to play for that guy because you wouldn't want to play for me. So yeah, those are some things that I think about when it comes to the recruiting process that, and sometimes it might be a guy's only choice, or, sometimes it might be like, it might be the ACC that am I going to turn down an ACC school to go to a CAA school just because I get treated better? Well, you might be with me. You might end up there anyway. So, you know what I mean? So
it's the thing of substance that matters. And the facilities thing, it's interesting that you bring that up when the kids talk about facilities and gear, because it is such a prominent thing now. But when we have these conversations that guys that we work with and families that we help, and we talk about this on the podcast too, is everybody's got what you need.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a weight room, a field, baseballs, and uniforms, The rest is on you. You don't get better because their weight room is twice the size. It doesn't get better because they get 10 pairs of batting gloves and you only get 2. That doesn't make a great player. There's plenty of kids who are excelling and moving on to do great things at the next level of college baseball or the next level to pro ball that didn't have all the cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're at Niagara with James Avery. Like, James Avery didn't need some fancy weight room to be a 5th round pick. He probably worked pretty hard and it was pretty talented. Like, that stuff, if that's what you're splitting hairs on this process, you're focused on the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
no doubt.
I mean, at the end of the day, everybody, college baseball now, everybody's got some sort of a bad deal. You're going to get some cool gear.
Yeah.
Do you have coaches that you feel can help you get better as a player?
Yeah.
Do you have coaches that you feel are going to help you get better as a person? And is there a legitimate opportunity for you to make an impact? That's another thing I think kids need to think about, is that you're going to have to earn everything you get, but you can look at the tea leaves and be like, oh, well, you know, they got 3 infielders who were all freshmen and they all played every day as freshmen. And I got another school where they're graduating 2 guys. I think things are really similar. Like, I probably have a better chance to go make an impact at another school. Like, think about the stuff that impacts you long term, not the superficial stuff that, like, I promise you, if you've got 27 t-shirts from wherever school you go to when you graduate, like, you're going to end up handing them out to people anyway. So, like, you can only keep so many. And I get it. It's fun. It's cool. It's tangible. But, you know, if you're going to a specific school because of that, and that's the difference maker, I think you probably need to sit down and have a little bit of a deeper conversation exactly about a lot of the things that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Shoot, I wish we got more stuff at Marist, but I'll tell you what, my Russell Athletic hoodie is still freaking going strong. 20.
Hey, they don't build them like that anymore, man.
100% cotton. That thing is shrunk to an extra medium. Still trying to squeeze into that thing at night.
I have those. I have cotton T-shirts. You know, we were a little bit. We were still in the cotton era 20 years ago, getting cotton T-shirts.
The cotton era.
I also have, my parents moved, so they packed up all their house. I also have our windsuit travel suits.
Oh yeah, I missed those.
It was a true windsuit.
True windsuit.
I had a couple pairs of those left over that I always wore up at Niagara, and they don't have any left here at William & Mary. So I got to figure out my windsuit pants, because
no polyester in those.
Those are comfortable.
Swoosh.
Yeah.
Swoosh as you walk down.
Yeah.
God, I found those the other day. I was like, wow, they don't make these anymore.
You can have all the swag in the world, man, but if it's not comfortable and it doesn't look good, it doesn't matter.
No. But there are people who make decisions that way, and it's always a weird thing to me. Like, you're gonna get stuff places. Like, you need to go to a place where, you know, the non-tangible stuff it matters. You know, it's everyone has cages, everyone has a field, everyone has a weight room. Like, what, you know, and I think the other part too, like that obviously the academic side of things too. Like, William & Mary's a great school, RPI was a great school, Vassar was a great school. Like, if you're in the high academic world, like, some of those times we're splitting hairs on the academic side of things, and it's like, look, they're all great schools. Like, it's, you know, but you, like, the other side of it is, like, you have to be able to handle that. Like, you have to be honest with yourself that you can handle that side of it as well, right? Like, there could be a tremendous difference between an RPI, being an engineer at RPI, and being an engineer at a state school. I'm not going to say anyone, but, like, it's a different type of education that you're going to undertake, and you know, going through the recruiting process and being at least self-aware enough to know, like, okay, like, yeah, I want engineering, but, you know, it's going to be it's a bear at RPI to get through engineering, you know, and that opened my eyes, right? Like, when you talk about evolving, like, there's certain weeks at RPI where, like, it's tough to really do anything because it's a test week.
Right.
And, you know, dudes are up until 3-4 o'clock in the morning studying because they need to get a 3.5.
Right.
And, they show up to practice and it's zombies.
Yeah.
And, as I got, I was like, I need to know when test weeks are. Cause like, I will back off, like I'll back off practice and like, I won't do a whole hell of a lot of heavy lifting during practice because one, we're not getting anything out of it. Two, like we're going to get people hurt. Like I'd rather you guys just come out here and use this time to like decompress and get out of here. Like, yeah, we'll just take BP and make sure our arms are good and we'll fly around the field and have some fun and get out of here. And we got way more out of that. And it was a lot better for the team to do that because it's like, all right, we don't have to go bunties or first and thirds. Like, they're more worried about building airplanes and the test they have versus like where do I have to be on the field in this one specific instance that, you can get more out of it that way. But I think that like the academic piece, I think sometimes gets, lost. But, by and large, if you're looking at higher end academic schools, like they're all really good. Just find the one that you think is going to fit you the best.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you hit the nail on the head with just understanding what the kids are dealing with. And it means a lot to them, like to get it, and that's also one of the things I've evolved with is, more days off. It's kind of funny. This goes back to COVID spring 2021, so in 21, your Red Foxes almost lost the whole season. They were one weekend away from not playing. And we were their first opponent. And, we played we played two doubleheaders, right? So Saturday doubleheader, Sunday doubleheader, 7-9, 7-9, like a bunch of idiots because we were trying to make up for the games that we lost the year before. And we played day one and it was a dogfight. Like they were fresh and we'd already played like 4 or 5 weekends or something like that. And Traz was like, is this what it's been like all year? And I'm like, yes, it's been a bloodbath every single game. And he's like, well, at least one thing's abundantly clear. He's like, we don't need to practice as much in the fall as we all thought we did. Because we couldn't practice in the fall. And I kind of never forgot that thought. And I was like, listen, we're built like this, right? Like, hey, I'm not going to be outworked. Like, we're not going to leave a stone unturned. I'm going to look at myself in a mirror at the end of the year and say, we did everything we could. But at some point, like, you kind of have to look at the summer ball model and go, man, my guys still play really well in the summer because they're just really good ball players, And so as long as we got the defenses down, we got some stuff taken care of, and we're working on the little things. And sometimes it makes more sense to do small groups instead of practice. And sometimes and get them out of there. And, sometimes it makes more sense to give them a day off when they're struggling instead of grinding on them harder, like they're not trying hard enough. And, you perceive that test week and all that stuff. And that's part of evolving too. That's part of being a coach that understands. And the kids will pay you back in spades on those things.
Yeah. We had the same thing at RPI. We weren't going to play in 21 either. And ultimately we did. But it was like, I'll never forget, like everyone had a bunch of games. We opened up with Rochester, who was really good. And after the fourth game, we got swept. We were, same thing, 7-9, 7-9, straight out the gate. I had 18 players. Mm-hmm. And we were swinging underwater in game 4. And I go out after the game, and it looked like we had an entire litter of puppies that just got slaughtered in front of us. And I was like, what's the matter? Everyone's like, well, we wanted to win. I was like, guys, we haven't played a baseball game since like 2019. Like, we got the opportunity to be out here and play baseball. Like, win, lose, draw, whatever. Like, I won't, like, if we can be out here doing this, this is all I care about. But it forced me to get creative, to your point about that stuff, because it's like, we can't just hammer 18 guys all year long. Like, and there's so much more value. In the fall, I went to a lot more of small group stuff because there was a whole other element of the academic model where like my sophomore or my juniors weren't on campus in the fall of their junior year. So like I had an entire cohort gone,
Right.
so it was like, do I need to really practice for all of these days? Like I'm more interested in like having anyone here for inter squads. I'm not going to put in a bunch of defenses because half the team isn't here. Let's do small group stuff and just focus on the skill work that guys need to get better, and we'll see how it translates in game. And I think that there becomes a lot more like, and then we went heavy weight room, and all of a sudden you saw like, the gains in the weight room started translating on the field, and like there was a lot more buy-in on a lot of that stuff, and it made us better in the long run because of that. As much as I did not like some of the things that we did, like I also understand that they have to do their job as an institution. They don't really care about me as the baseball coach complaining about stuff, but it made us better for doing that, and ultimately, changed my philosophy on some of that stuff. Like my wife and I talk about it. She coaches, and I'm like, do you have to do that? Like, why don't you just put them in small groups for the day? She's like, maybe I'll do that. And it ends up being better, and I think sometimes like, you're right. This game for so long from a coaching standpoint, like I think I had an epiphany once where I was standing at Diamond Nation watching two fields in the corner, and I was like afraid that I'm missing something. And I was like, there's so much baseball going on in the country right now that I'm missing. Like,
Right.
I'm just going to go bear down on like the kid that I actually need to bear down on. And I think, but it's that real FOMO. And I think like when you get over that as a coach, like you can start to do some stuff. Cause like at the end of the day, man, like there's so much baseball being played. You're going to be able to see as much as you want, but like you're going to burn yourself out eventually if you're just chasing your tail on a lot of that stuff, for all you young buck coaches out there. But what do I know?
Yeah.
Just a washed up college baseball coach.
Yeah. And oftentimes like they'll still come in, they'll just do it on their own time, right? Mm-hmm. Like where they're more bought in and it's more one-on-one and, stuff like that. Like if you gave, like last year we had the best season we've ever had in Niagara, and I gave more days off than I've ever given. And it basically they would all still come in, but it'd be on their own time. And they would, and there'd be, a couple guys that didn't, and they were grinding. And even if their grind was playing golf, like at least they were getting away, and getting their head right. Guys would go fishing, guys would go play golf, and it gave them it gave, not only were they hanging out, but it gave them a sense of freedom and just rejuvenation. So it's very valuable.
Yeah, we would do it on Thursdays because Thursdays were a super heavy class day. Like we would just do small group stuff because I would have, half the team would show up at 5, and then the other half was leaving at 5:30. So it's like, well, we're not really going to get a whole hell of a lot done at practice. Like, let's just do small group work during the days. Mm-hmm. I'd look at their schedules, like, all right, you have 2 hours free here. Come out to the field for half hour, 45 minutes, stretch, throw, get some swings in, work on some stuff. Yeah. And like, you ultimately find that like, it's far more beneficial doing something like that than trying to run a practice with like 9 guys.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
They got to enjoy it. And sometimes the best way to enjoy it is to be away from it a little bit. And to your point, like an extra Tuesday off week 11 of the season is not making or breaking what you're doing. And me and Keith talked about this the other day, and I think this is important too, that what you ask those guys to do is hard, right? Showing up every day, putting your uniform on, competing your butt off in practice, being a really good teammate, being a good student. Like that's hard to do consistently, and they got to enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. As soon as the fun gets sucked out of it, and I don't care if you're 12 or if you're 21-year-old professional prospect, as soon as you don't enjoy showing up to the field, it's over. Mm-hmm. And that can happen really quick with the grind of college baseball, where you get into the season and it's just like, game Tuesday, practice Wednesday, travel Thursday, game Friday, Saturday, Sunday, off day Monday. And then you just do it and do it and do it. And you get in this monotonous streak and you start going through the motions without even thinking about it. And you lose that passion for showing up and competing and doing all the stuff you need to do. And it's amazing. A little bit of a switch in the routine, a day off. To your point, like, hey guys, we're not going to do full team practice today, but we're going to do some small group work. You come down, a little bit more personal interaction with the kids. Like, it's almost like a refresh button that can be like a little bit of a superpower if you got a pretty good feel of how to use it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, we would do there was a couple falls where like it rained and I was like, yeah, we're not practicing today. We're going to make it up. I'm like, if we lose one practice in the fall and that breaks us in the spring, like we're doing something like the wheels fell off and it went wrong. Like it's not going to be this 1-2 hour practice in the fall with 20 guys that broke us. Like, go do whatever you want to do. If you want to hit inside, go hit inside. But
yeah, we actually did that. We actually did that this fall. And they were not used to that. And it rained like the second day. First of all, it was the only day it rained, so I can't complain too much, but not that I'm rubbing it in or anything, but it rained like the second day of fall and I had them tarp and they're like, are we going to come pull tarp tomorrow, practice, whatever? And I'm like, nope, we're just going to hit inside and we'll be out here the next day. Like I'm not going to have you guys pull the tarp, fix the field, get it all ready, grind just to have a practice that's not going to matter 6 months from now. When we can be just as productive and not do all that stuff. So it was, man, talk about scoring points right off the bat. That'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the final question that we always ask, and I have a feeling you're going to give some good tidbits here, but is you're going to give some advice to players and parents who are going through this process right now. What would be some wisdom you can impart on the listeners around how to navigate the recruiting process and maybe some things to potentially prioritize?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Especially nowadays. I would say just exhaust all of your options. Like there's a lot of resources out there you can invest in. There's Twitter is free. Kids don't do. First of all, they don't do enough research. It seems as though they think that the onus is on hey, if you're good enough, they'll find you. Well, that's not true, man. Like there's a lot of kids that haven't been found by certain schools that have been plenty good enough. So you got to go get what you want. And the first thing you have to do is you have to make a video, and a good video, not like, I don't want these highlights that are all blurry that I can't see anything. So you kind of have to have a little feel with it. Like make a nice video where it's got some skill. You've got some skill, exposure in there. If you're a pitcher, maybe you've got the radar gun and they're showing some velos. You've got 60 time you're taking. You've got, you've got BP swings, but then you've got game highlights that you're showing. And then make it just really easily accessible. I find the ones that have the most traction for me are when I get an email with a very short, succinct, look, I'm interested in you guys and this is why. Because I'm looking for the why. Like if you're just, if you're just blasting out emails and there's not a why William and Mary, then then you're not paying any more attention to me than I am to you. You just found my email. So you say the why, and then you have the link to your video, which maybe your link is at your Twitter profile with the video pinned to your first tweet. So that makes it really easy for us to look. And, there's a couple things like if you're using Twitter to market yourself, as much as you want to come across as a team guy, don't retweet 25 of your friends before your last highlight. I'm not scrolling through 25 videos just to find a video of you that I can see, like pin it to your profile. So it's the first one I see. That way, like I've literally stopped scrolling on kids' profiles before being like, can't find a video of this kid. So I'm just going to like how much, because I think the way you have to look at it is how much work do you want us to do to find out how good you are, right? Like we get tens of 20s emails a day that sometimes we can't answer emails every day. So there's 40 in one day. And the guys that make it hard for me to see who they are, it ain't happening. So that's a nuanced thing. Don't be afraid to use your connections. Like if you have a connection to the school, say it. And that goes all the way to like, if you have tuition exchange or tuition remission because your parents work at like, your parents work at St. John Fisher and you want to go to Niagara to play baseball, say it. Like, yes, you might cost yourself some scholarship money, but you already get tuition free. But I've actually like had kids where I'm like, oh, you get that. So that will move the needle for me. Like I'll take that kid, and give them a shot. So don't hold back your connections. If you have, an alum that played or your aunt went to school here, those are all valuable things to know. Identify the schools that you want to go to first. And listen, we all know this is the dirty truth that nobody wants to acknowledge. If you email a coach at this level 3 times, any level, 3 times, and you don't get a response, unfortunately, that's not a place for you. Like whether it's whether the coach looked at your video and just didn't take the time to respond or, was busy and was like, nope, like, whatever, who knows what the coach's philosophy is on returning emails and all that stuff. Just move on to a different level or a different team at that same level. Right. I would say look at every level. There's good baseball at every level, man. There really is. And really good coaches at every level. Your goal should be to go play for a good coach where you have an opportunity to see the field in your first couple of years. You have a fair shot to do that and develop. And, I always used to tell people at Niagara, like, there's people listening to this podcast that don't even know what Niagara is. And frankly, I didn't know what it was until I went there. And like in the last 7 years that I ran that program between me and Spat, there might not be one kid that left like being unhappy about his experience at the school and on the team. And so there's a good chance if you find the right fits of the things that you genuinely value, that you're going to have a great experience no matter what. I mean, I went to school in Mitchell, South Dakota. Like, I grew up in Oregon. I didn't even know where it was on the map till I started driving towards it, right? I just took the first scholarship offer I got, and it was the only one I got. So I went out there, and it was the best experience of my life. Like, and there's 13 to 15 schools in that conference in the middle of America that people have never heard of that you would still have a phenomenal experience at. So as long as you're willing to go where you need to go and do what you need to do and you stay true to yourself, there's opportunities out there. Guys just get in trouble when they're chasing something that they're either not going to get or that they're not being realistic about. And so that would be, those would be my main suggestions. JUCO is not, contrary to what you hear on Twitter, you can't just go to a junior college and play. Like, there's some really good junior colleges out there. So you still have to do your research on junior colleges too. And then to top it all off, you've got to figure out if it's the academic fit, if it's got your major. I'm probably a little backwards in this because it's going to sound weird, especially being at William & Mary. But like, I was a 4.0 student, and it didn't matter where I was going to go. I was still going to be a 4.0 student. So for me, if you want to play baseball bad enough, you find a degree that you can pursue, and then you just attack the degree no matter where you're at. And you'll have a successful experience in college. Now, if you want the connections and you want the networking and you want all that stuff because that's what you value, then you choose a school based on that as well. But just because you choose a school to contact and do all that stuff doesn't mean they're going to reciprocate. And if they don't, then you need to find a different level or you need to find a different school. Because I can tell you, there's not one time that I've gotten an email from a kid that I looked at his video and thought, wow, that dude is really good, without me reaching out or one of my assistant coaches reaching out. So if you email us or you email a coach and he thinks you're really good, you're probably going to hear from them. And if you don't hear from them, then, you can probably take an assumption from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that stuff's really, really important. I mean, such an interesting process to go through. And I think early on, people think about it as a process of accumulation, and I need to get as much interest as possible. But at the end of the day, it's really a process of elimination. And sometimes getting a no from a coach early is what you need to right the ship in terms of where you're focused. To your point, you might have aspirations of playing at the Division I level, but if 20 different Division I coaches don't think that you have what is needed to compete at that level, that might be the information you need to shift your focus to, hey, maybe there's some really good Division III schools out there that I need to be spending some time on. And you can't go through this process blindly and just assume that everybody who didn't agree with you got it wrong. And, that information that you get is really important. And it's a tough part of this process. It really is, because there's a lot of, for the vast majority of kids, they get told that they're not good enough to play at places. Mm-hmm. And you can take that information one of two ways. You can basically brush it off as like, well, they're wrong, and you're stubborn and you get caught in the recruiting process where you get to the back end and you don't have any options. Or you can use that to help guide yourself and make sure that you're targeting the right types of schools. And if you need that chip on your shoulder to excel when you get there, great. But that information, that feedback you get throughout, like you have to acknowledge it, and you have to at least recognize that, you may get some feedback that you don't want to get, but it might be the best thing that can happen to you in the process.
Yeah, it is a crazy process, because don't we want the kid that doesn't, that says, I'll prove you wrong? Like, like one of the best players I ever had turned down, walk-on offers at USC in Oregon, and he's from San Diego, California, and he came and played at Niagara, and because he wanted somebody to invest money in him. He wanted a scholarship. Like he wanted that mutual investment, and ended up being a 35th rounder, and he made the big leagues 2 years ago after being in the minor leagues 11 years. So, and he was that kid that you just like tell him you can't do something and he'll do it. But there's a limit to that. And you kind of have to, like you said, you have to take all that information in and you kind of have to start in the right spot for that to lead to your next right place, basically, because you can't just keep getting told no or not getting responded to and still think that, everything's fine there. And if the answer to that is then go start at a lower level and work your way up, now that there's a portal and that's an acceptable thing to do, then there's also nothing wrong with that either. At the end of the day, you're trying to prove yourself at the level you're at. And sometimes, like, if you're reaching anyway, like, why would you want to reach and then go play somewhere where you're not going to play? Right. So yeah, you might make a team, you might make the team at a level, you might be on the team, but do you want to play? Which for some kids, that's fine with them. So those are all things that you have to come to grips with as a kid and a family is, what do I want out of this? Like, what's my perfect scenario? And then just try like crazy to find that. And then, like you said, yeah, it is a process of elimination too, at the same time. Just like I was saying that, I'm trying to find the nose in my recruits. Well, and when you're recruiting schools, you should find the nose, because if you find the nose and you find enough of them in the right spots, then you'll kind of get slotted into sort of where you are and where you might fit. And that information is like you said, the earlier you get that information, the better, man. Like, yeah, it stinks. Like nobody wants to hear no, that your dream school you're not good enough to play at, but delaying that answer is only going to make things worse for you. And especially now in these times where we are going through this huge transition of what level of talent you have to actually play in college baseball anymore. No, the floor, like you said, Keith, the floor barrier is like so much higher than, and people they're still having a hard time wrapping their head around it, because they're like, well, 4 years ago, my buddy, I watched this kid play and he was this good and he got to go to this school. And you can't do that. You can't even do that right now, because 4 years ago was way different than now. Like the amount of talent that I had on my team last year at Niagara compared to the pre-COVID teams is crazy, man. Like, we had 3 Power 5 transfers. And pre-COVID, that wouldn't have happened. Those guys would have stayed on those teams and they would have been on the roster, and they wouldn't, or somebody else's, but they were all trickling down. And, we had guys stay that were there for their 5th year because of COVID. And yeah, while that COVID stuff is dwindling, the portal stuff's not. We're still replacing dudes with D3 All-Americans and 4-year transfers and stuff like that every year, because you never know when a guy has medical red shirt, or he got red shirted and then got better and all that kind of stuff. So families, like the ones that impress me are the ones that know this stuff, whether it's they play for somebody who knows it, or they hire someone who knows it, or they enlist somebody's help from an advisor who knows what's going on. Because it's just impossible for the coaches themselves to spend time to educate every single person that reaches out to them. But the kids, they should know that this is getting harder and harder by the year. And, what's going to happen with the 34? Well, think about that. Like there's 15 players on every team, every Power 5 team that are going to get dropped. Those guys are going to go somewhere, and it's not going to go, they're not going to the bottom. They're going to go down, and then our guys are going to go down, and then down and down and down. And then the next thing you know, in 1 year, the kid that usually could have played college baseball cannot play college baseball anymore. And that's just literally the reality of it, And so these 25s specifically are in a really tough spot, because there's nowhere to go. Like, and that's not anybody's fault except, the people that wanted to sue the NCAA for not making enough money. But it's the world we live in. And so, man, it's tough to navigate. And I don't envy that guys getting, offers, pulled out from underneath them, and coaches doing what they have to do. But that's the world we live in. And so you can't just sit back, Like it's tough when, like right now, if I'm getting an email from a 25 that is like, hey, I've always been interested in your school and this and that. And I'm like, where have you been? Like, what rock are you living under right now? Because you're like, this, not to be disrespectful, but man, if you want to play, like, let's get some understanding of what's happening right now in college baseball and figure this out, right? Like,
Yeah,
because it's crazy.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's more competitive than it's ever been.
Yeah,
it's twofold. It's exactly what you're talking about. Like, you got the roster crunch coming, you've got the transfer portal, but the kids are better. I go watch high school games in Northern Virginia. In every game I go to, the kid who's throwing is 85 to 88 every game.
Yeah.
They're falling from trees. In 10 years ago, that kid's a surefire Division I scholarship kid somewhere. And now coaches have the luxury to really nitpick at a kid. And that kid's ending up at Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like I'm saying, like, okay. So for example, when I took over Niagara in 2006, we had one guy that could throw 88. That would be no surprise to you. Well, you guys played against some of the best pitchers that ever went to Niagara, but we had a couple down years. We had one guy that could throw 88. Last year we had one guy that couldn't throw 88, like in 22 pitchers. And it's just nuts. And listen, I'm seeing those same guys. You're talking about the guys in Northern Virginia, and I'm like 85, man, that ain't going to cut it, man. But the unfortunate thing about that is that with the right body type and the right movements and the right everything, you might get me to jump on that because I like the ceiling, man. Because I'm like, hey, I remember when we recruited Matt Brash and he was 79 to 82, and now he throws the ball 100 miles an hour with the best slider in Major League Baseball. So, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just got to get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Wild times.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Well, I'm gonna try to make it down when you guys play BC.
Yeah,
make an appearance. Maybe we can go to Dog Street after the game and grab a beer or something.
Yeah, there we go.
Get over to Dog Street Pub yet? Get over there. They got some.
Dog Street. What part of town is it in?
It's right in Colonial.
Okay.
Right, the Confusion Corner near the Wren Building.
Yeah. In
that little where those stores and stuff are on the backside, right before you get to Colonial Williamsburg. They got some good food there. You should take your wife.
Yeah. Yeah, we had Mellow Mushroom is there now. And, we've been there a couple times, but I haven't seen that one. It might be tucked back in. They got Precarious there, and we need to get out more though. We'll have more time now. But yeah, come on down. We've got that's going to be that Central Virginia Challenge is nice. It's BC, Penn State, Toledo, all great coaches, guys I've known for a long time. So it's good, man. It's crazy. Like I tell you, I worked like 13 camps my first summer in coaching, and a lot of the dudes that I know to this day are from just meeting guys working camps back then. We were just grinding camps.
That's how you get to know people.
Yeah, it was crazy.
100%. Well, we appreciate you, man. Glad you were able to stick on as long as you did, and really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad we took it in the direction we did. Some topics that we don't always get to touch on that I think are really important. So really appreciate your time, man. Obviously, good luck this spring down in Williamsburg. I'll give you a shout before I head down. I'm gonna, like I said, I want to meet up with Coach Tischler at BC, who's a good friend of mine, and take my wife back to the alma mater and come watch a game at the Plume.
Nice. There you go. Well, thanks guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you next week. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.